Hello, welcome to the second video of the channel, um, as promised. Uh, the last video I talked about kind of the purpose of the channel, uh, place to kind of promote dialogue around spirituality, um, religion, faith, psychology, and actually have real dialogue concerning real issues. Um, so from the last video, I did mention that I was going to kind of give you a summary of, I guess, my last year of homelessness, struggling with mental illness, just kind of trying to overcome that and get ahead of all of this. And it's been a really hard journey thus far. So yeah, let's dig in. So before all of this last year, I want to talk a little bit about. So I developed ulcerative colitis back in like 2019, and it's a really harsh disease, um, depending on the severity. Uh, and mine became very, very severe. Um, and I don't know, it's a chapter of my life that was, I guess, kind of disappointing, kind of, I don't know, destructive in a way. I mean, I'm still here, but I mean, if it was not for the grace of God, it would have destroyed me, or I would have destroyed myself. Um, so to kind of speak about the experience, I it initially started out kind of slow. I was in school studying, and I was living at my parents at the time, and I started having to use the restroom very frequently. I lost a lot of weight, um, and it just ramped up to the point where I was having to run to the bathroom every like 5 to 10 minutes, and um, and that was not just during the day; that was day and night. So I was not sleeping at all. And when I did get some sleep, it was probably for like an hour, hour and a half, and then I'd have to get up and use the restroom again. Uh, I lost a lot of blood through the process, and I became anemic. So at one point, I did have to get a blood transfusion because I was so anemic. Um, and really, I mean, I became so anemic that to get up and get out of the restroom took a ton of energy. And Um, there was a few times I did faint on the way to the bathroom. One night it was like 2 in the morning. Um, I kind of fainted and hit my head on the counter, and then kind of slid down the wall and hit my head on the floor. Um, and uh, and yeah, it was starting to become a common occurrence, uh, that things like that would happen. There was other symptoms as well, but I'm not go too deep into those at the moment. Um, But another consequence of all this, I also have schizophrenia. So um, while I was, I guess, kind of eroding away, um, I did stop taking my mental health meds because I was getting like negative consequences. I was actually more anxious, started to feel kind of paranoid, and there were a few other symptoms, but like nausea and stuff like that. So I did have to kind of do this without my mental health meds, which actually compounded the problem. Um, and it was a hard road. I mean, I was sick for a long time. I would say over the span of, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, I went down from 220 down to like 125 uh, in weight. So yeah, it was really hard to hard to experience. And I think one of the things too that really made it significantly worse was I was doing this all without any like emotional support from anyone. I kind of tuned out of everything. No one really followed up on me. Um, and it was a very isolating experience. Um, there was a point where my dad said I had to go find a new place to live. I guess he didn't want to deal with the problem. So I went to my brother's here in Utah, and the symptoms were still pretty bad. Um, I had been trying a bunch of different medications, and nothing seemed to work. Nothing alleviated the symptoms. So when I came out here, I was still in pretty rough shape, and I met a doctor. His name is Jeffrey Braden. Phenomenal doctor, well liked amongst his peers, probably one of everyone's favorite doctors. Um, and we had a conversation. I kind of explained what I'd been through, and he said, "You know what? You're not well now, but we're gonna get you better." And you know, he prescribed a certain regimen of medications, and within a few months, I was up on my feet. I wasn't having to wear diapers. A lot of the symptoms had cleared up. Um, which I'm extremely appreciative of, because if I had to continue down that road, I would not have continued. Um, so he really gave me a second chance at life, and I appreciate that, and I am going to do my best to make the most of it. Um, so I really started to get better around 2022, I think. 2022, 2023, somewhere around there is when I met Dr. Braden, and really after that it was just kind of me getting back to normal. um, I was on social security, so I had my basic expenses met. I was on social security disability, and I had just enough money to get by, just enough money to cover my basic expenses, buy food, take care of myself. I had health insurance at the time, so that was pretty much covered. um, and yeah, I don't know, the fact is it was a really prolonged illness. So it's like 4 years of like a really painful experience. So I was just trying to get back to normal and kind of get back on my feet. And I was going to the gym. I was seeing a mental health counselor. um, I had built a really, I guess, happy life for myself in a way. I was reading. I was gaming when I wanted to. I had structured a pretty good life for myself, and I was just trying to, I don't know, find gusto for life again, I guess you could say. And in 2025, in the summer of 2025, I got a letter from Social Security saying that I was no longer considered disabled, and I had 2 months to basically find a job, figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. Um, and I wasn't really expecting that, because these are permanent conditions, and I wasn't even aware of like how much trauma I was carrying around at the time. And I'll get into that on the back end of all of this. But um, yeah, so I had 2 months to figure out a job, find significant income where I could pay for all my needs, because I was basically losing all my benefits from this. And um, yeah, that first month I just kind of panicked, because I was like, what? I didn't see it coming, because none of the doctors mentioned that this was a possibility. No one talked about it. It just, boom, I got a letter one day. Um, One of the things I guess that was kind of good from it was I had a lot of credit card debt, because I was sick, so I was living off of pretty much credit cards and Social Security, and I had bumped up my debt to, I think, about 21 grand. And through this process of, living off Social Security, doing a healthy life, managing my finances, I did end up getting it down to about $9,000 before I got this letter. Um, so I was really making progress, and I was planning on the next steps, and it just kind of hit me out of the blue. And I had to get a job. So that last month, I went to a staffing agency, and they placed me at a job at R.R. Donnelley as a temp worker. And that was really hard work because they do 12-hour shifts. Um, and it was this weird schedule where it was like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And then the rest of the week, you have to transition back to like daytime stuff. So it takes like, 2 days to do that. And then on top of that, I had not been sleeping well for like a very long time. Uh, so it was just a really hard life. And yeah, so I guess my experience at R. Donnelley was definitely not a positive one. Um, I mean, I got there, I was working. It was my only form of livelihood at the time. Um, and because all this like happened all at the last minute, I was not able to afford my room at the house I was staying at anymore. So I had to start living out of my car. And yeah, essentially what happened was, the culture there is really toxic. Um, a lot of unhappy people, and um, I was working hard, working my ass off, but didn't feel really appreciated. Um, and really, it was the only option at the time. And the management there wasn't very good either. Um, that's a whole problem in itself, and I'll actually kind of get into that a little bit. Um, I got paired into a department where I had to work, and basically we did the shipping and receiving for the evening, stacking boxes, processing mail, all that stuff. And we were a three-man crew. But unfortunately, one of the guys who had seniority and had been working there for some time, um, like half of his shift was spent in another department where they didn't really need him. Um, so all this box lifting and shipping and receiving now is on the shoulders of two people, and all the processing on the computers and everything. So we're down a man. Um, and really the real problem stems from so I guess he had a drinking problem, and from time to time he would come in smelling of alcohol. And I didn't say anything about it at the time because essentially I was relying on this job, and I was trying not to make any waves. But going into this job, there's this element of OSHA compliance, safety regulations, because there's heavy machinery. Um, so I had to go through this little training, and there's forklifts moving around and stuff. And essentially, I felt it was really hypocritical because they were allowing this behavior. Because, like I said, he was hanging out in the office. People were, I'm not going to say were, might have been aware of his situation, but I'm sure they were. Um, and essentially the way this works is you work there for 3 months, and after that time, they can decide whether they're going to make you a full-time employee or not. So my 3 months were coming to a close, and I was pressing to get full-time employment so I could get benefits and all that good stuff. And probably like a night or a few nights, like probably like a week or two before they actually, I guess, confirmed whether they were or they weren't, because he said they said they recommended me as they were going to, but he came into work drunk to the point where he had like bloodshot eyes. um, I was kind of in charge for the department for that evening, so I was calling the shots as far as doing the computer work, telling people what to do, kind of doing workflow management. And he's really copping an attitude with me, um, on simple requests. Could you do this? Because so and so is doing this. Can you take care of this? And this would be your thing you do for the next hour or two. And he just didn't like it. So basically, I reported it to the boss. I said, "Hey, he needs to go home like now." And I don't know. I've been having other problems there as well, and it came to the point where I sat down. Basically, I wanted to have a meeting with everyone involved. So the first meeting, we did this all sequentially. So the first meeting was me, the guy who had been drinking, my shift supervisor, and the general manager, and we talked about it and discussed it, all of us amongst ourselves. Um, we had that conversation. The guy who had been drinking left, and then it was just the supervisor and the general manager and I. We had our conversation on that level, and then the shift supervisor left, and then it was just me and the general manager, and we had our conversation on that level. And um, yeah, essentially they just told me they didn't want me to come back, so I lost that job. Elwood staffing called me and said, "Hey, they don't want you to come back." So I lost that. Not really a big loss in the sense of um, like pride or anything, but I mean, it was a huge wrench in the gears of me moving forward. And yeah, so I told you I had cut my debt more than in half. Um, and after that time, I decided that I was going to go kind of see the rest of the country because I had nothing really here. Um, Felt kind of like I had lost everything. Uh, so I basically drove around the entire country. I even went up to the Canadian border, and I think they were going to let me in because, you know, I don't know. I'm an American citizen, but I'm not a proud American citizen. Like when I see what we've created and what we've done with this place and how we treat each other, kind of disgusts me. And the fact that corporations have more rights than individuals, I really don't like that. And that's things we'll probably discuss in the future. Um, but they sent me back, so I came back. Um, and it was kind of an interesting conversation because when I pulled up there, they told me I have no rights, and I was like, "What? Everyone has rights." And from that conversation, I think they decided to send me back. um, so after I lost that job, and while I was traveling, all my debt collectors started calling me, and I mean, there was one debt collector who called me 5 times in one day, and that was just one debt collector. Um, and those calls started like 3 days after I missed my first payment. That's how much these people want your money, and they have no regard for you or what you're going through. Um, and that's another thing we'll talk about. So yeah, fast forward today, and back before all this happened, even with all the debt I had been carrying, my credit score was like 750, and I don't really have any significant assets or anything, but I prided myself in good credit. I even mentioned to my brother before I left that I had like not missed a payment on anything like almost ever. And now my credit score is like half that. It's probably in like the 300 somewhere now. So, so thank you. God bless America. Um, So after I went to the border, I went to Tennessee, um, because I got a brother out there and I spent some time with him. Um, but while I was there, I checked myself into St. Thomas Ascension Hospital because, as I mentioned before, okay, well, I didn't mention this before, but I had been taking olanzapine for my schizophrenia, and it had made me gain a lot of weight, uh, and my cholesterol was really high. So I switched over to Spiridone, which is something I tried before, but it was ineffective before. So the timing on switching those medications was really bad because I wasn't aware that it was going to leave me in a bad position. So, anyways, I went into St. Thomas for to like check myself in because I was really struggling. A lot of like suicidal ideation, um, just trying to keep everything under wraps, keep all my bills under wraps. You know, just trying to stay afloat, keep my life together. But it was becoming way too overwhelming. So I checked myself in there, um, and that was an interesting experience as well. Um, and I want to preface this by, or preface that story by kind of saying this. You know, I've struggled with mental health my pretty much my entire life. Um, it's part of the reason I opted to go study psychology because in the Hippocratic Oath and in the writings of Hippocrates says something along the lines of "physician, heal thyself." So I wanted to understand my condition and how I could alleviate it and essentially overcome my infirmity and teach other people to do the same thing. And this experience, like, really is like the polar opposite of what I expected, like, real practitioners to be like. Um, yeah, so I checked myself into the emergency room. Uh, they wanted to put me on a 3-day hold, which I was okay with, um, because you know I needed care. Um, I understood that. I think they understood that. Uh, and yeah, I was just trying to stabilize my situation. Um, my brother at the time lived at a town from where that was, and you know I told the doctor and the nurses that my brother was allowed to visit me so we could coordinate how this care was going to play out, and they would not let my brother come and visit me while I was in the emergency room. um, I mean, he drove out there and everything, and they turned him away. The nurses said it was okay. You know, I was like, "Hey, cool, awesome." The doctor vetoed that, though. Um, they kept saying I had no choice in me being committed, which was really uncomfortable, especially since I had checked myself in. I mean, there are rights to all of this, and you know, I felt like mine were being violated in that capacity. Um, and then the whole like the atmosphere they created there was really uncomfortable. I mean, I was already kind of paranoid and really on edge. And I mean, there was this one evening, so they put me on the 5th floor where they do heart surgeries and stuff. And one evening, one of the girls, they made me be under constant surveillance. So I was in a room, but the door was always open, so I could hear all the noise 24/7. And they had to have someone sitting in a little chair watching me. But one of the women who was working there, she came in, and I was already paranoid and already kind of um, not in a good place. And she was talking to me about performing autopsies and heart surgeries and all kinds of weird things. And I was like already in a messed up place. So that was really uncomfortable. And then on top of that, before I went in there, um, there was a woman who handed me a book because I requested something to read while I was there. And the first page or two of that book is about a child having their face smashed in. It's like the setting of a detective novel or something, and it was disgusting and inappropriate. And that happened. And I mean, I was being underfed. I checked the calories. I was getting like 1,900 calories on the biggest day, and because they have the little sheet of how many calories you get. So I felt like I was starving the entire time, and they made me ask for water. But when I would ask for water, I'd have to ask like 3 or 4 times before someone actually brought me some water. Um, Pleasant. Fortunately, I kept my phone with me. I didn't want to let them take my phone, and I decided I was going. I didn't want to continue with their care. Uh, I don't know. Like it wasn't an atmosphere based on trust or anything. So, like I didn't want to continue because if that's what they're providing from the get go, I did not want to walk that path. So I kept my phone with me. I decided to start calling some lawyers, and when they realized I was calling lawyers, they just decided to let me go. Um, yeah, they didn't really fight me on that. So yeah, I ended up leaving that place, and I am going to take a break for right now and continue the second half of this. But yeah, thus is the story so far.